Why do so many people finish books without really understanding them? That question is sharper than it sounds, because it means that finishing a book by itself does not prove very much. Welcome to Joe's Thinking Lounge, driven by curiosity. Today, let's talk about a very unusual book. The book is How to Read a Book. What makes it unusual is not that it teaches speed reading, and it is not that it gives you a system for highlighting, note taking, or pulling out quick takeaways. What makes it unusual is something deeper. It asks very basic questions that most people rarely stop to ask seriously. Do you actually know how to read a book? That sounds simple, but it really is not. Because a lot of people can read words, a lot of people have read many books, but that does not automatically mean they know how to read a book well. What I found most striking about this book is that it does not treat reading as a technique problem. It is not asking how can you read faster? How can you finish more books? How can you extract the main points as efficiently as possible? Instead, it asks a much deeper question. Why do so many people finish books without really understanding them? That question is sharper than it sounds, because it means that finishing a book by itself does not prove very much. Sometimes we have only moved through the pages. Sometimes we have only remembered a few points. Sometimes we have only worked away with the feeling that we more or less understood it. But that feeling of "I think I got it" can still be very far from real understanding. This is the hidden problem the book is trying to expose. A person can read an entire book and still miss what matters most. They may still fail to see what problem is the book trying to solve. What is the author actually claiming? How is the argument built? And what kind of judgment has the book really earned? A lot of the time, the problem is not lack of exposure. The problem is that we confuse familiarity with understanding. We have seen the language, we recognize the topic, we remember a few conclusions, and that make us feel as though understanding has already happened. But the book insists that those things are not the same. Familiarity is not understanding. Completion is not comprehension. So the central claim of the book is very clear. Reading is not passive reception. Reading is active understanding. That sounds straightforward, but if you take it seriously, it changes the role of the reader completely. A real reader is not just someone who keeps moving through the text. A real reader keeps asking questions. What kind of book is this? What problem is it trying to address? What are its key concepts? How is it organized? How does the author build the case? So, real reading is not just a matter of getting to the last page. It is a matter of entering the logic of the book carefully enough that you can actually follow another man at work. One of the most powerful things this book does is change the way we enter a book in the first place. A lot of readers begin with fragments, a striking sentence, a vivid example, a point they immediately agree with, a claim they want to reject. That is natural. But the book warns that if you get pulled into fragments too early, you may lose the architecture of the whole. So it insists on a very important principle: see the structure before you chase the details. Before reacting to the parts, you first need to understand the whole. What kinds of books is it is? What problem is it addressing? How is it put together? Only after that do the details begin to fall into place properly. Otherwise, you may remember a handful of fragments while missing the real skeleton of the book. The book's most famous framework is its four levels of reading. The first is elementary reading. At that level, you are reading the words and understanding the sentences. The second is inspectional reading. That means getting a quick but meaningful sense of the book's overall shape, what it is trying to do, and whether it deserves deeper attention. The third is analytical reading. Here the work becomes much more serious. Now you are trying to understand the concept, the claims, the argument, and the structure. The fourth is syntopical reading. At that point, you are no longer reading just one book in isolation. You are putting multiple books into conversation around a shared question. What makes the list framework so powerful is that it reminds us of something readers often ignore. Not every book should be read in the same way. Some books deserve a quick inspection. Some deserve slow and careful analysis, and some only reveal their full value when placed inside a larger network of books and problems. That changes not only how you read books, but how you organize knowledge. There is another lesson in the book that I think is especially important. A lot of people read with their judgment already switched on. I agree with this. I disagree with that. The author is wrong here. I do not buy this argument. Those reactions are natural. The problem is that very often judgment arrives before understanding. So the book insists on a discipline that sounds basic, but is actually quite rare. First, understand actually, then judge fairly. That matters far beyond reading. It matters in law. It matters in philosophy. It matters in public debate. And it matters in ordinary life. A lot of disagreement becomes shallow, not because people are incapable of judgment, but because they judge too quickly and understand too slowly. To me, the deeper value of this book is not simply that it helps people become better readers. Its deeper value is that it turns reading from a habit into a discipline of thought. We live in a world flooded with information. There are endless summaries, endless clips, endless condensed takeaways. What is scarce is not information itself. What is scarce is the ability to turn information into structured understanding. That is why this book still matters. The real enemy it identifies is not ignorance alone. It is the illusion of understanding, the feeling that we know when in fact we have only skimmed the surface. This matters especially in legal reading. Legal texts cannot be approached only at the surface. Whether you are reading cases, statutes, policy documents, and academic articles, you cannot stop at the conclusion. You need to ask what problem is being addressed? What are the controlling terms? What is the reasoning structure? What assumptions support the conclusion? Why does the argument arrive where it does? Without that discipline, it becomes very easy to make predictable mistakes. You remember the outcome without understanding how it was reached. You focus on a detail while missing the real issue, and you start judging too early. So, in that sense, this is not only a book about reading, it is about a book about understanding, judgment, and the serious self education. So, if I had to reduce the deepest lesson of this book to one line, it would be this: a book is not just a collection of content. A book is a structured attempt at thought. And the task of a real reader is not simply to get through it. It is to see what problem the book is addressing, to understand how it is built, to judge it only after understanding it, and then to place it inside a larger system of thought. That, to me, is why this book remains worth reading. Thanks for watching Joe's Thinking Launch. Stay curious. See you next time.